Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. Dungeons & Dragons recently released its starter set and I think this is a great product. It has something in it that I really like. Ability cards. Something a player can hold in their hand that gives them an idea of what their character can do. I have in other videos advocated for packs of action cards and bonus action cards that would go for each class that players could buy and have in their hand. In fact, hang on, I've even made such things that I've talked about. In this bag I have spell cards that I've printed out for myself, but other things as well, such as Hexblade's Cursed, Retarget Hex, Song of Defense, Shell Defense, Level 1 Spell slot Warlock. And these are color coded based on when you get them back. If it's green, you get them back at the end of your turn. If it's yellow, you get it back on a short rest. If it was pink, you get it back after a long rest. The idea being that you can see what you've got and how many times you can use it. If it's green, you can use it every turn. If it's yellow, you have a limited number of uses, but you will get them back during the day. And if it's pink, you only got one use of that thing. It's a nice way to keep track of spell slots as well. And I think things like this are really, really useful. The starter set for Dungeons & Dragons has some action cards. Not a complete set, but enough to get started with. I think that's a great step in the right direction. But what else could we make? What else could Dungeons & Dragons make that would be a useful product that players would want to buy? I think this is something that Dungeons & Dragons does quite poorly. It's a fantastic game with amazing mechanics and story and art and legacy. They just haven't turned it into a set of products very well. I think that clever game design mixed with the right attitude to making products could lead to a lot of useful things that players and dungeon masters would want to buy. And again, I have this philosophy, I've mentioned it so many times before, that the product should be nice and helpful, but not necessary. You shouldn't be forced to buy these to play the game. Keeping the bar of entry low for Dungeons & Dragons is one of my design priorities, and should be the design priority for anyone who's writing for the game, because that's one of the things that makes the hobby wonderful. It is so easy to get into. But at the same time, there should be a whole range of products that you can go, actually, I've got a bit of money and that would be nice. That would make my life easier. So I've been brainstorming an idea on this. And one thing I'd really like to see is monster cards, something that the Dungeon Master can use to help combats, and an additional product that the company could make and sell. Now, how would these work? Well, let's look at it at the moment. You're playing in a tabletop. You've got your monsters manual or your campaign book with you, and every time there's a combat, you need to flip between multiple pages to get the different stat blocks for your creatures. This is far from ideal. So instead, what if you could get packs of cards, printed cards with just the stat blocks and the actions on it? You don't need the background, the lore, the tactics. Those are all useful and should be included in the book, but just a quick reference card for you to run the combat. That would be fantastic. And when you buy a campaign book, there can be an extra little pack of cards that you could buy as well if you wanted to, and saying, hey, these are the monsters you're going to be fighting in this campaign. Do you want these quick reference cards? Everything's in the book. You don't need them, but it will make your life better. Now, I think that'd be a fantastic product. I think we can do better though, because a lot of these creatures are one use only or limited use only. Goblins, your typical goblin ambusher, is a relatively low challenge rating creature, and once the party has got to a certain point in power, they fall out of use in the game. They're not a challenge unless you're throwing hundreds of them, and any combat in which you're throwing hundreds of something that's the same, it's just going to get bogged down and boring. So how can we make it more interesting? How can we make it more useful? If I'm going to imagine a product that is going to be a monster card for you to use, how can I make sure that this is useful in more than one tier of play? That once the players progress past a certain level, this stack of cards is no longer useful for anyone. How can I make sure they get more use out of it? And that is when I came up with these two designs. This one's upside down, this way around. Okay, what are these? This is not a printed monster card. I'm envisioning a plastic casing in this shape with a card inlay. And the card inlay has the name of the monster, the layout shows all the information, and this little box here has got a list of the different actions they can do. So nice and easy. What are these black sections here? These are cutouts, because underneath is a rotatable wheel. And that rotatable wheel looks a bit like this. And all those different boxes have different information on. Now, the ones that I've shaded in black, they are one set. And the grey ones are just repetitions of that, each set rotated through 45 degrees. That means there are 8 sets of this information here. And the black ones just represent one set, the first set. There shouldn't be any overlaps. There are a couple of little overlaps. That's because I just threw this together in a couple of minutes and I'm not a graphical designer. But the idea being that if you rotate this wheel through 45 degrees, an entirely different set of information is now visible through these cutouts. That means you can level up these creatures through 8 iterations. If it starts as a challenge rating half goblin skulker, you click once and now it's a level 1 veteran goblin skulker. And you click it again, now it's a challenge rating 1.5 sneaky goblin ambusher. And you click it again and now it's a challenge rating 2 scarred goblin ambusher. And this information, the name and a few different abilities and stats and strengths, gets changed every time you rotate it. I would advocate for an idea I had in a previous video using damage points rather than hit points. So no bookkeeping is necessary to keep track of damage. Most minion level troops will take 1 or 2 damage points to kill. And you can just put a token on the wounded ones rather than have to keep track of wounds. These would have pre-rolled initiative. So you can just literally put the tiles in initiative order to keep track of things. No having to write down what order things in. That makes life easier. And as you click through the levels of these creatures, the amount of damage points, the challenge rating, the experience granted, the hit bonus and damage, armor class, resistances, whatever pieces of information you want, change as it levels up. So now you have 8 different levels of monsters represented on one of these. Now, I'm not going to say that a goblin ambusher is still going to be a valid enemy to use in tier 4 play, but it means that a creature that's difficult in the first tier can become a minion in the second tier, or difficult in the second, or a difficult individual in the second tier at a higher click, and potentially still be a minion used in the third tier of play. So you can use this one monster card for potentially 10, 12, 14 different levels of players as they progress through the game. And of course, this just represents one kind of monster. Now, ideally, you would have 8 or 9 or 10 different goblin ambusher ones, and each one would be slightly different equipment, maybe a slightly different set of abilities, slightly tougher, maybe different resistances, and obviously different initiatives. So that if you wanted to draw 5 or 6 goblins, you could set them all to the same challenge rating, and they'll all be a little bit different. Some might have spears and bows, others might have sword and shield. And you just pick the ones that you want to use, and now you've got an entire mob of goblins with all the information laid out in front of you. Using the damage points and pre-rolled initiative, there's no bookkeeping involved. You can just run the combat. That's nice and easy. If you're using tabletop models, which is always really nice, I encourage that if possible, you can color code them, and there'll be a little recess or something where you can put a color marker on this, maybe like a little recessed divot here where you can put a color token and go, okay, the yellow goblin on the board is represented by this yellow monster thing. And that's a nice product. That's something that perhaps dungeon masters would want to buy. Perhaps that's something that dungeon masters would want to have a collection of. So you could have your goblin tribe, and there would be 9 or 10 goblin ambushers, a couple of goblin champions, a goblin shaman, a couple of heavily armored goblin warriors, and this set of 15 or 20 different monster boards can now be used through 12 or 15 levels of play, 3 tiers of play, using the same resource again and again. Because you're getting multiple uses out of the same resource, this is now worth buying. This is now worth having a collection of. You've got your goblins, maybe you've got your orcs, maybe you've got your undead, maybe you've got your dragons, all with one of these each. And of course, for the larger, more powerful monsters, it might be a situation where you have one of these octagonal bits and another one, and you have two of these. And you obviously have to rotate them both so they're at the same challenge rating, but you have even more values that can change. And by changing the size of the blocks, you can change different texts. I envisage that one of these could be like the name of what it is and the challenge rating or experience, and well, you can do whatever you want. The point is that by making a wheel with rotational symmetry added into it, you can change the level of the monster that you're fighting with. And by doing that, Wizards of the Coast can make a product that will be useful, will be collectible in the way that you'd want to have a collection of them. And again, not mandatory, because all this information is included in the books. It's just more awkward to flick through the pages all the time. Even in a digital format, if you're playing on a virtual tabletop, you've got all your different monster cards, and you might have 5 or 6 of them open up in a separate monitor if you have a dual monitor setup, and you're still having to click through which ones to see what's going on. Even on a virtual tabletop, having the physical versions of these on the table with you might be easier to keep track of than the digital version online. That's how versatile and useful this product is. And because of that, I believe that would be a product that people would want to buy, and that would create a revenue stream for Wizards of the Coast. When they talk about the game being under-monetized, people always assumed it was things like microtransactions and subscription-based services. I don't think that's what most people want. They want stuff they can buy, they can add to their hobby collection, and they can use through multiple experiences. Every time there's a new campaign book that's got new monsters in it, there could be an extra set of these to go with those monsters. Every time there's a story module, a campaign module with individual monsters, throw those in as well. And now you've added them to your collection when you're playing a homebrew game or a homebrew campaign. You've now got an extra set of resources you can use, and you don't have to flip through multiple books to combine monsters. You don't have to have Curse of Strahd, the Player's Handbook, and Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, each with 20 different bookmarks in. You just pick out the ones that you want from your collection from a nice box. Heck, Wizards of the Coast could even sell a nice box for it. That's something that I think's missing from the game right now. If I was in a position of authority in Wizards of the Coast with Dungeons and Dragons, that's the kind of thing that I would be advocating for. So, what do you think of that idea? Is that a product that you would find useful? Is it something that you'd want to buy and add to your Dungeons and Dragons collection? Let me know, and enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.